Good morning, guys, and welcome to our lesson. Today we will deal with a specific part of our teaching unit about Swift and Gulliver's Travels, and we will deal with the use of satire in Gulliver's Travels. What are the techniques which Swift uses in order to write a satirical piece, okay, a satirical novel. As I usually do, I will share my desktop with you, okay, so you will be able to follow me. I will tell you something else, that this presentation, this PowerPoint, together with a kind of summary, okay, some notes about the satire in Gulliver's Travels are already available in the folder Swift and Gulliver's Travels that you will be able to find in your Didactica. So, you know, okay, that Gulliver's Travels is usually considered a kind of satirical novel. The first and mainly most important, and the maybe most important thing to be said, is that it obviously clearly reflects all the conflicts and all the situation that that happened in British society in the first part of the 18th century. So in the moment, in the period when Jonathan Swift lived. It is clear that narrating Gulliver's adventures in the four places that he visits. So in the book number 1 in Lilliput, in the book number 2 in the Brobdingnag, the land of giants, in Laputa, and in the land of the clever, intelligent horses, Hoyum. Swift wanted to criticize the corruption and the sins of Britain, mostly of the British ruling class, of the British powerful classes of the period, and he also wanted to denounce, to criticize their exploitation of the people living in neighboring countries, for example Ireland, because we know that he was actually an Irishman, he was an Irishman, he was born in Dublin, and also of the other countries which were the first colonies that England had around the world, okay, in the world. You know that the story, so it's based totally on the social and political reality of Swift's time. And so it is clear, or it was clear when the book was published, and so this is a reason, the reason why the first edition of Gulliver's Travels was published anonymously. It was clear, I was saying, to all the people who read the novel that the writer was satirizing on the British society, on the British politics, on the British religion, so on the scenes, on the corruption of Britain at the time. But what we can say now, and that's why the book, the novel, is really interesting, it is this kind of criticism, this kind of satire, it is not only on the British politics and religion and society of Swift's time, but also on human nature itself. You know how a misanthropist Jonathan Swift was. You know, we have already stated more than once that Jonathan Swift wasn't particularly fond of humankind, and this kind of criticism takes the form of irony and satire in his novel Gulliver's Travels. I would like you to focus on this kind of mind map that I have made for you. And this mind map is very useful if we want to focus on the different types of satirical technique that Swift uses in Gulliver's Travels in his novel. We have said what satire is. You know what satire is because you watched the two videos. You also sent me your own definition, okay, of satire. And today, here in this mind map, we are focusing on how Swift managed to write a satirical novel. What are the different techniques that he used to make to write a satire? A satire. So they were mainly three. He used what it is called verbal irony, as you can see here. He used an irony that is called situational, and another form of irony which is that's named dramatic. So verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. Obviously, we will focus on the characteristics of all of them, because if you say that Swift used verbal, situational, and dramatic irony, you should also know and understand what they are. What is verbal irony, what is situational irony, and obviously what is dramatic irony. Let's focus on what verbal irony is. Verbal irony is mainly based on opposition. Okay, as a matter of fact, all of the three types of irony are based on opposition, on contrast. The opposition on which the verbal irony is based is mainly of two types, of two kinds. On one side, there is the opposition between the character, okay, so what the character says and what the situation is. So there is a contrast, an opposition, as we said, between the words spoken by the character and the language or the situation in which the character speaks. Another kind of opposition which the verbal irony is based on is the contrast, the opposition between the words that used by the character or by the characters that are usually positive, laudatory significa che lodano, ok? Praising. And this opposition comes or happens or is played between the use of these positive, laudatory, praising words and matters that are evidently ugly, stupid, banal, trivial. So this is what we mean with verbal irony. Don't forget that it is verbal, as you can see here, verbal, so it means that is based on the use of words, and it is based on opposition, on contrast, the contrast between what the words say and their real meaning. Okay? I am giving you some examples of verbal irony taken from everyday life. Okay, for example, as I have written here, a sister, or a mother, walks into her brother or her son's very messy apartment where he lives alone, and she says, as you can see here, "Oh, you are still the king of clean." Okay, so let's guess what the situation is like. This is verbal irony. Una sorella che entra nell'appartamento del fratello dopo tanti anni e con il quale condivideva la camera da letto da bambina. Ok, quindi sa quanto disordinato sia il fratello entra dopo anni in questo appartamento dove vive il fratello, messy apartment, messy significa completamente disordinato, caotico, e gli dice, afferma, ah, vedo che sei ancora il re degli ordinati, ok? Yes, this is obviously a kind of verbal irony. The contrast here, as we said before in the slide before, is between what the person, in this case the sister, says and the situation. Okay, and the irony, we see that what she says is ironic because a contrast between what she says and the situation has been created by her words. Okay, another example that is really trivial, banal, is, for example, a woman, as you can see here, I have chosen down for you, which spills all the cup of her morning coffee on her white silk, precious, elegant blouse, and she says, "Oh, this day couldn't be off to a better start." Ok, questo giorno non avrebbe potuto cominciare meglio di così. It's usual. You can see how clear the verbal irony of this situation is. Okay. Now, I hope that you have understood what verbal irony is, most of all thanks to the two examples, matter-of-fact examples that I have just given you. Now, let's focus on another type of irony that is used, that is one of the satirical techniques used by Swift in Gulliver's Travels, which is the situational irony. Okay, what do we mean when we say situational irony? Sorry. The situational irony is based, as the verbal one, obviously, on a kind of contrast, on a kind of conflict. Okay, and on some kinds of conflicts. The conflicts on which situational irony, l'ironia che deriva dalla situazione, okay, is based, are mainly three types, three kinds. There is a conflict between the words and their literary meaning that makes this kind of irony very close to the verbal one. Then there is a conflict between the expectations of the readers, okay, if we speak of a novel, or of the audience, if we speak, for example, of a film or of a play at theater, and what happens, what really happens, the outcomes of the event or of the events. So the conflict that here is created deals with the situation, the events, okay, and what the readers or what the audience expects. Okay, or the reader, sorry, expect, or the audience expect. Or it is also based on another type of conflict, that is the conflict, the contrast, the opposition between the actions, the personal actions of the character, and the facts, what happens, the situation, okay, itself. So the most important conflicts are the conflict between the words and their literary meaning, what they mean, the contrast, the conflict between the expectation of the audience, of the readers, and the events, the outcomes of the events, what really happens, what actually happens, and the last conflict, which the situational irony is based on, is the one between the facts, what happens, the events, and the personal actions of the characters. Okay, also for this kind of situational irony, I have chosen some examples for you taken from everyday life to make them more comprehensible. Okay, more easily comprehensible. So, for example, it is a kind of situational irony if a fire station burns down, se prende fuoco e viene distrutta dal fuoco una stazione dei vigili del fuoco. Okay, it is obvious, it's an example, very trivial, banal, of what a situational irony is. Okay, there is a conflict between what we expect, okay, and what happens. Everybody would assume that the firemen, okay, would keep their own building safe. Okay, nobody would assume that a fire station can burn down. So this is a kind of contrast between what we expect and what actually happens. Another example, a police station gets robbed. Okay, there is a robbery at the police station. Again, we can see a contrast between what happens, okay, and what we expect, okay, because everybody, okay, one would assume that crime fighters, so the policemen, would be able to help themselves, okay, securing their own station. But it doesn't happen. The police station gets robbed. It's ironic, isn't it? It's ironic. Mm? And this is a kind of situational irony based on the contrast between the expectations of the reader or of the audience and what actually happens. Then let's go to the last type of satirical technique used by Swift in Gulliver's Travels. That is what we have called the dramatic irony. Okay, let's focus on dramatic irony. Also, the dramatic irony is based on contrast. We have just focused on the fact that all the three types of irony used by Swift are based on a sort of contrast, conflict, opposition. And what type of contrast is dramatic irony based on? Mainly, it is based on the contrast between the actions and the words of the character or of the characters and what the audience knows. The understanding, okay, the knowledge of the audience. I can make some examples, okay, about what dramatic irony is. For example, don't forget that everything is played for the dramatic irony between this kind of contrast um, the contrast between what the audience, what we, the reader, okay, know, the readers know, and what happens in the novel or on the stage for a play, on the screen, for a movie, for film. Okay, this is the contrast. For example, think of a scary movie. Okay, very scary movie. In which there is a character which enters a house and this character thinks that this house is completely empty, that there is nobody there. For example, a person, a character who comes back home after a long work day, okay, a very hard work day. He thinks that he is or she is completely alone, that her house or his house is a very safe place where to stay, nobody there. But we, the audience, know exactly that there is a killer in the house. This is a kind of dramatic irony, okay, and it is used to increase, in this case, the suspense, okay. The contrast, the opposition is between what happens, what the character thinks, and what the audience knows actually about, or the audience, sorry, know about the situation. Okay, another example that you can see here is very basic. Okay, it's taken from The Beauty and the Beast, La Bella e la Bestia. I think that everybody knows the story or seen the movie. Okay, the audience know since the beginning, okay, from the start, that the beast is actually a prince living under a curse. Okay, that is not a beast, but he is a prince living under a curse. Everybody knows it from the start, but Belle, okay, the beauty, Belle, doesn't know it, is completely unaware of the identity of the beast, of the true identity of the beast. This is a kind of dramatic irony. There is a contrast between what the audience know and what the character knows. Okay? I hope that this description, this very short focus on the three types of irony used in Gulliver's Travels is clear enough. Okay, sorry, I needed to go on a little bit. And now we are focusing on how or what are the targets of satire in the four parts of the novel. You know what the four parts are. You know that in each of his journeys, um, Swift, okay, brings Gulliver or makes Gulliver land on different lands. All of them have got their particular features, their special characteristics, and in all of them there is a specific type of satire target. We are focusing on targets of satire in the four parts of the novel. What are the targets? The targets sono i bersagli. Chi sono i bersagli della satira nelle quattro parti del romanzo? Ok? So, four books and four different types of satire and four or more targets of satire. Okay, let's focus on part one. I hope you remember what part one deals with. What is his first voyage? He is in the land of Lilliput. These very small, tiny creatures, human beings, only 6 inches tall. Okay, and we can say that in this part, in the first book, okay, the satirical attacks made by Swift on humankind, on humanity, on man, are mild if compared to his bitter and strong satire in the other parts of the novel, most of all in the fourth part of the novel. So his attacks are satirical, but are mild, relatively mild, okay, never too bitter. And in this novel, his disgust for the humankind, for humanity, is not yet completely visible. Okay, you cannot see it completely. It is a little bit hidden. Okay, so the satire, there is satire, but it is mild. Mm? And why? Because if you read the book one, so um, Gulliver's experience, Gulliver's adventure in Lilliput, you will see that there are a lot of happenings, a lot of very also amusing facts, situations. And these amusing situations, these ridiculous sometimes happenings, help the reader because they provide an atmosphere which is relaxed. Okay, you smile, it's not that bitter. Okay, so there is a satire, but it is, as we said before, mild. Okay, why? Because we smile, the reader smiles a lot because of these ridiculous happenings, but and so the atmosphere is relaxed. Mm? An example of this satire, of this this type of mild satire can be given, for example, in the part in which Gulliver describes how he saved the palace of the governor, of the emperor, and the wife of the emperor, the emperor's wife. Okay, I will tell you very shortly what he did. There was a fire broke out, okay, burned, okay, in the palace of the tiny emperor and of his wife. Gulliver took the opportunity to save, to make them understand that he wanted to help these tiny creatures, these tiny people, and but he didn't have his coat. So since he had drunk a lot of very good wine, he tells, he decides to peace on the emperor's palace, and this pissing, okay, on the palace where the emperors and his wife live, he managed to save the palace the from the fire. Okay, it is an example of this mild satire that he uses in this part, in the part one, in the book one of his voyages, of his adventures. But we have just said that even though the satire is not bitter, is mild, okay, rather mild, it doesn't mean that there isn't satire. There is. The satire is clear. And what are the targets of the satire in this first part? The first are the Whigs and Tories, so the two political parties in England at the time of Swift. We have already said much about them. I hope you remember who were the Whigs, okay, and the Tories, the Liberal and the Conservatives, okay? And they are criticized thanks to the contrast that there is in Lilliput between the high hills and the low hills. I hope you have, but if you have read carefully the plot, you should know who are the high hills and the low hills. They are the two different factions, parties, which are always in opposition one with the other in Lilliput. Okay, and they correspond to the English Whigs and Tories. So his criticism, his satire focuses as a target, for example, the Whigs and the Tories. Then the two islands of Lilliput and Blefuscu. You should know that there was a war, a very long war between these two islands, neighboring islands, okay? You can also see how they are represented. They have the same shape of England and Ireland, you can see. But England, sorry, and France. In fact, the everlasting war between Lilliput and Blefuscu represents the war between England and France. You can see also how they were portrayed. There is this kind of drawing in which Lilliput, the island of Lilliput, is represented as Britain, and here Blefuscu is represented as the shape of France. Okay, so this contrast, this everlasting war is criticized thanks to this kind of irony that he uses. And also another target of Swift's satire in the book one of the novel is the conflict between Protestant Okay, Protestants and Catholics. The war, the fights between the warfare between Protestants and Catholics, and it is represented by the conflict that happens here in Lilliput between the big Indians and the little Indians. Do you remember who they are? Please tell me that you remember who they are. They were the two factions in Lilliput which had been fighting for years on which was the proper side to break an egg, the big end or the little end of an egg. What is the proper way or the right way to break an egg? Okay, so what can we understand? That as in Swift's opinion, there wasn't a proper or the right possible way to break an egg from the big end or the little end. Um, as there was no possibility to choose which was the best one, um, the same way it was impossible to understand what was the real religion. Were the Catholics right? Were the Protestants right? Who knows? What to fight for? So this warfare between Catholics and Protestants is criticized as the conflict between the big Indians and the little Indians in Lilliput. Okay, now let's go on to the part 2, book 2 of Gulliver's Travels. You should remember, I hope, that Gulliver finds himself in the land of giants, okay, in Brobdingnag, the land of giants. So, from the land of Lilliput, of the very small, tiny creatures, only 6 inches tall, he moves or is taken after a period in England in the land of giants in Brobdingnag. Here in the book 2, in the second part, when Swift narrates, tells the adventures or Gulliver's adventures in the land of the giants in Brobdingnag, the satire is more clear, okay? And the attacks on humanity and on political issues of the time are more clear, are more clearly implied. Okay. In this part, in fact, Swift, using the words and the adventures and the actions, the deeds of Gulliver, begins to tell, to express his discontent. His discontent with Europe, okay, and is discontent with England. Why is discontent over Europe? We said discontent over Europe. Why discontent over Europe? Because don't forget that at the moment, so when Swift wrote Gulliver's Travels, okay, Europe was the world's dominant power. Okay, Europe, not only England, but Europe, generally speaking, was expanding its possessions, its dominions, and had started, as you know, its practice of colonialism. We have already said much about colonialism. Think about the colonialistic issues in Robinson Crusoe, for example. So you know what the situation was like. And in the book 2, so in the part of the adventures in which Gulliver is in Brobdingnag, in the land of giants, it is clear this discontent over Europe as the dominant power of the world and over the practice of colonialism. Okay. Um, In fact, let's focus on what we said about the first adventure in Brobdingnac. Um, Here, as you see in the picture here, Gulliver is tiny, is very small, and the farmer who saves him and gives him to his daughter in a cage, like a kind of attraction, small animal, okay, um, represents the people who wanted slaves, ok? He is enslaved, viene reso schiavo, ok? It's a kind of toy, okay, a kind of doll that is made to perform tricks to visitors who pay to watch his show. Okay, so you can see how the satire, how the criticism is made. There is a kind of situational kind of irony. Okay, now let's go forward to part 3. As we have read this morning together in the passage The Academy of Lagado, in this part, during this voyage, um, he finds himself in on a flying island, the flying island, for example, of Laputa. Okay, this is a flying island, and in this third part, swift satire shifts from the political, social, ethic aspects to the academic field, to science, philosophy, art, religion. Think of what we have read, we have already read, okay? Think of the short extract taken from the part 3, the chapter 5 of the part 3, the Academy of Lagado. Think how the satire is made in this extract that we have read, okay? How does Swift manage to create this satire? What is the target? The target we have said is the academic field, so it's religion, science, art, philosophy. And how does Swift manage to create this kind of satire? On which type of irony is it based? It is based mainly on the verbal and situational irony that we have just seen, we have just focused on, and it is made of on the description of scientific experiments that are completely impractical, useless. Okay, the strangeness of Laputa is based on the primacy of theoretical and abstract concerns over practical, concrete, matter-of-fact concerns. So, what really matters to these scientists, to these projectors, as we have seen they are called, is only what is abstract, theoretical. They have always got their heads in the clouds. Okay, as Laputa is flying, there is a flying island. So are their minds. They are not practical, they are not concrete at all, they are only theoretical and abstract. And what they do, the experiments that they keep on doing, are completely useless. Okay, for example, think of the experiment of taking the or trying to take the sunbeams out of cucumbers in order to heat the governor's garden, or think of the experiments of making food out of human excrements. Okay, they are only two of the dozens or hundreds of strange, theoretical, abstract, and useless experiments done in the Academy of Lagado. Okay. Then let's move forward part 4. As you know, part 4 sees Gulliver in the land of the horses, of the clever horses, okay, and of their servants, the yahoos, who are human-like creatures. And in this part, more than in all the other parts, the satire is really bitter. It's not mild at all as in the beginning, okay, but it is very bitter. It is expressed to extreme. Swift disgust, hatred for the humankind is it really reaches is extreme. And why? Here we see that the humans are made servants. They are a kind of barbarian population, okay? And they are the servants of these perfect and clever beings which have the appearance of horses, that look like horses, okay? Gulliver, for example, tells one of the horses that in his country the yahoos, so men, are the governing creatures. Okay, and the horse looks at him, stares at him suspiciously. How is it possible that the yahoos, were really like barbarian, okay, can govern a country? Here, don't forget, in the part 4, the satire is taken to its extreme. The disgust, the hatred of the humankind. Okay, the fact that, as we said, Swift is is yes, AIDS, sorry, the humankind is really clear. Now, um, in order to finish, I would like to say that this novel. Now you know the novel. You know what is the plot of the novel. I go back to my face. You know what is the novel. What is the plot of the novel. Now you know what satire is. What are the types of satire that we find in Gulliver's Travels. You know the plot. We have also read one extract taken from the novel. So, what I expect from you is that you can speak, you can tell me something of the novel, of the characteristics of the novel, of the central issues, matters, topics, themes of the novel, and you can speak about it, okay? So I am putting the link to this video on or in the folder that we usually use, and I have already put, as I told you, the presentation, the PowerPoint in PDF, and the notes dealing with what I have just told you in the same folder, Swift, Gulliver, and Gulliver's Travels. Bye bye, guys. See you soon. See you next Saturday from 8:30 to 10 online. Bye bye, guys. See you.